A very good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for Issues at Hand this morning. It is a great morning, and in case you are still home, planning to get out and go to work, the weather is very clear today. It is not raining as it has been in the past few days, but we want to thank you so much for being with us and giving us your time this morning. Of course, it is a few minutes past 9 o'clock, and we start with Issues at Hand this morning. Now, of course, my name is Caro Amani, and that's Caro Amani on social media platforms. Remember, our social media platforms are at COU Family TV on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, as well as YouTube, where we post these subsequent videos. We are powered by Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe, comfort and luxury at its best. Of course, they tell you that they do have different cuisines on their menu that you can go and try out with friends and family. In case you want to sleep in as well, they do have beautiful rooms where you can sleep in. Now, today we are discussing a topic that is very dear to our hearts, very dear to my heart personally, because I am one of the people that we are going to be discussing. Long ago, I was born and I came into this world with an impairment of eyes. I couldn't see well as I had crossed eyes up to now, and I suffered some torture, or should I call it discrimination, where my friends in class used to laugh at me and say, "Where are you looking? You're not looking at us, you're looking the other side." And I went through it traumatically, but here I am, and I went through it. But I would like to be a voice for those who were like me, those young people in schools who have some kind of disabilities, but were not able to speak out. I took up this job so that I can be able to speak up for them. Now, today we are discussing persons with disabilities, a very special group of people in our society that we ought not to ignore. And with me in studio, of course, is none other than the Minister of State in charge of disabilities at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Her name is Honorable Hellen Asamo. You're welcome this morning to studio.
Thank you, Caro, for the invitation, and I want to thank Family TV for the invitation. And I want to greet all the viewers and the listeners out there that today we are here to discuss the Deaf Awareness Week. And I want to greet all my deaf colleagues out there. A good morning to you.
Thank you so much. Before we get to the Deaf Awareness Week that started on 19th September and is ongoing, I'd like to introduce the gentleman that you see interpreting for us. His name is Jagwe Michael, and he is a sign language interpreter. In case you are a person that is unable to hear what we are saying, at least you can understand as the signs go on, and we will be having him all through the show to guide us. I'd like to start with a simple question. What are the barriers that the PWDs face in our community today? The strongest barriers that they face?
Yeah, Caro, I think when people talk about barriers, you have just talked about being discriminated because you had your eyes had a certain challenge. But for me, as a minister, I look at barriers from the environmental barriers. If the barriers in the environment are corrected, then there will be no disability. For example, I have walked here, I'm on 13th floor, but because there was a lift, I was able to come.
Yes.
If you left me to go through the steps, I wouldn't have arrived here. So the barriers are majorly the environmental barriers that make us really not get to services. Because, for example, if I'm deaf and I come into an institution and there's no sign language interpreter, it means I will not get a service. If I'm physically disabled and I come and your doors are too small and I have a wheelchair, I will not get in. If I come in and I'm blind and you have put barriers everywhere, this blind person cannot access. So the biggest barrier we have as a disability community is the environmental barriers. And I want to say the Building Control Act and the Committee on Building is trying to make sure that these barriers are removed from the new buildings and we can have all our people access this kind of thing. We're also looking at barriers from information. Sometimes government gives big programs, but because the message is coming, the deaf community is not getting it because you have not put into the system of a sign language interpreter like Michael is doing today. How does this person get information? He will only see your lips and is not able to understand what you are doing. So the biggest barrier is the environmental one. Whoever is carrying out services should be sure that their environment is conducive enough to allow every person to come into that system. And if the barriers are broken, I'm telling you, there's no disability. Yeah.
Should the government start to close down buildings that don't have provision for these people? Because we are facing a challenge where some PWDs, they can't even access medical care because of some of these things. Should the government start to act on it?
I want to say that as government, we start, of course, with the legislation. And we already have legislations in place. And the legislations, right from an Act for Persons with Disabilities, Act 2020, that act is very conclusive in the areas people are supposed to handle people with disabilities. It mentions Minister of Health, it mentions Minister of Education, it mentions Minister of Information, it mentions people who do things of entertainment, because we also go to entertainment areas. So it tells you what you are supposed to do with a person with disability.
Okay.
We have the convention, an international law, and that convention is able to look at our rights as persons with disability. This is an international law, and Uganda has signed that convention, meaning that they have agreed to the principles of what the convention is telling them. I have just talked about the Building Control Act. It has issues of disability in it, and I'm very happy that the Minister of Works is struggling to reach there. We cannot close buildings immediately because some of these buildings were brought in before awareness was created. But we are telling people to improve as we continue moving, and eventually maybe we shall have to come up with other measures to ensure that if your building is not accessible to people with disabilities, then something can be done. But the new buildings have already been cautioned. You can't build a building when you have not put accessibility challenge issues for people with disabilities. We have the Communication Act. It has issues of communication, access to information, and I want to report here that that's why people like Michael are here. All the TVs now have been cautioned to have a sign language interpreter when you are giving out your newsprints. It is just starting, but we hope that all other programs will have sign language interpreters, because whatever you preach, when I entered here, somebody was talking about the word of God. These people want to hear about the word of God. How do we get there? But I also want to thank the Archbishop of Church of Uganda, who is one of the proprietors of this institution as a bishop, that he has done well, that when he came in, he brought a sign language interpreter in the name of Olivia to tell people this is the message the Archbishop is saying. And I'm telling you, it has changed the deaf community that they have started going to church. How I pray everybody emulates that, because the law is already there, and people just need to put it into practice.
Okay.
Yeah, and government has really come in, and government is supportive to see how we can support people with disabilities.
So as a representative from government, you are comfortable with the things that government has put in place to help the disabled, even when some of them cannot access information, like those in the villages and elsewhere that can't access information. Are you comfortable with what the government has really done to support the PWD's community?
I think comfort is a big word. I said we have started the process.
Okay.
Being comfortable, we have not yet reached
That stage.
heaven. We haven't reached there yet, because you have the laws in place, but the people to implement the laws have really not taken it yet on board. I will give you an example of UPE. We are told that children will be registered to go to school, and all the children, including children with disabilities, and the policy in Ministry of Education for all.
Yes.
When the budgets are sent to schools, and the headmaster, who is in charge of that budget, looks at this budget and says, why would I buy one ball for 5 blind children to play, instead of me buying maybe 10 of them to give the other school to play? So it means you deny these children the recreation because of your own thinking. You begin imagining they shouldn't be playing. They should be somewhere kept like a zoo. So the idea of implementation is still a very long way in Uganda. So I am not yet comfortable as a minister. I want to think that as government we come in to play the policy role, but we want to call upon the implementers to begin taking advantage of the environment of the legislation to see how can we improve on these people. I will tell you, Carol, personal as a minister, I can reach a place and people give apologies. We didn't know that, Honorable Minister, this place is not accessible. And you're like, okay. sometimes I've aborted the meetings. I've told them I can't get into a meeting and struggle with steps. You knew you were inviting a minister who was disabled. So it looks at the mind of the person now going to do the activity, very comfortable, invites you, but then you reach there and you're not whatever. So there's still a big challenge in the public. That awareness is still going to be a continuous process. We have to tell people what they can do for us and how they can do for us. Because some people even don't know what to do with us. They really get shocked because I've seen somebody wants to talk to my PA instead of talking to me. It looks like I'm sick. We are not patients. True. We are not patients. We are very good people. We are like any other human being. But somebody wants to talk to a sign language interpreter instead of talking to the deaf person. Because when if somebody is deaf, you have to look at this person's face and talk with this person. But find somebody is talking to the interpreter. The interpreter is supposed to deliver a message on behalf of you, the communicators. So I think the issue of the public, of the people implementing, is still a big challenge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Honorable, what are the strategies, since you've talked about awareness, what are the strategies we can use? Because if this discrimination can come to a minister, then imagine someone deep down in Bududa, a disabled person. What are the strategies of awareness we can come or create and make sure that all PWDs get information and get it in the right time?
Yeah, I think one of them, of course, I've given the strategy of the law, but there is also, we the disabled ourselves, demonstrating the capacity that we want to get this information. For example, if there is anything that is going to happen and we are missing, people will really take us for granted that we are not even there. But if we are available, people will think about us. So we need to demand our rights space. We need to tell people this is we have a right to be here, we are citizens of Uganda, we were born here, and this thing you are doing must also benefit us. So it has to start with us, the persons with disabilities. And then of course, the people who are doing implementation, especially government programs, there is no way under the SDGs that you'll now underlook to involve people with disabilities. Either in information, either in mobilization, either in doing anything. They're currently like the PDM, which we have, the parish development model. Government is thinking, says, okay, we are about 12.4%, and they are allocated as a 10% of the money that is going to go to the parishes, which is about 100 million. Meaning the 10 million is ours as persons with what? Disabilities. But if the 10 million is there and the disabled are not accessing it, or they are not even willing to get it, maybe they don't know, then there will be a problem. So there will be the role of the chief, the role of the committee to inform in that parish that there is money for people with what? Disabilities, who can do some kind of enterprise. Let them come and get what? This money. But the government also said, I've read that the policy said, no, this money is going to be there. We have even agreed as cabinet that we ring fence the money. So when this money goes, me as a minister, and when I'm monitoring, I'm looking around to say, did the 10 people in this parish get this money? So that we can know whether it is applicable.
Okay. Talking about money in the national budget of this year, 2023-2024, in the reading, we noticed that there was a cut in the money allocated to PWDs. It was from 16 billion of last year, 2022-2023, to now 3.3 billion Uganda shillings. Do you think this is the right way to go, or is this money going to be even enough for the community of PWDs?
Yeah, as far as budgets of the government were concerned, there was a cut across the board, and I will agree that there was a cut to 3 point something billion. That was for the special grant. But I want to say, having discussed in cabinet, we agreed to reinstate the money, and the money was reinstated to about 16 billion. But when we finalized the budget, we got back to 13 billion. So we are not at 3 point something billion, we are now at 13 billion. So looking at the cut across the board, you'll understand that I think we're still in a better position as far as recovering what was belonging to us, because other areas have really been affected. But I think looking at the cake, I found it like we're still at an equitable distribution level. So from the 3 billion we at least reinstated our 10 billion.
Okay.
At the time they finalized the budget at Parliament. So we have 13 billion point something to still manage the program.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the blind, for the blind person out there watching us, for the deaf person out there, for the lame person watching us, and there's 10 million shillings on the table in their parishes. How do they access this money, or how do they get comfortable? Because some of them even fear to go to the maybe the parishes, to their leaders to get this money. How should they access the money?
Yeah, I gave you an example that the parish chiefs should be able to mobilize our people to get there. We don't stay in islands, we stay in that community. And if I'm staying in the community and there's a leader there, an LOC2, who is a chairman of the committee, it is on his honors to mobilize me to come and participate in this program.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that we fear. Yeah, sometimes people have inferiority complex, but I am telling you, when something is for me, I will come for it. And I think the LOC1, the LOC2, and the parish chiefs who are going to be in charge of this program should be able to mobilize our people to benefit from this program. Because at the end of the day, when we are doing reports, we shall then ask them why they didn't mobilize them to come on board.
Yeah.
But with the program going out, many disabled people are aware about the government programs. And I want to appreciate that the knowledge and the information is with them. Some of them already have started getting this money. So at least we have information that some people have already accessed this money. Where I have launched, I have seen some disabled people. Because if you launch a group of 10 and you have like 2 disabled people, to me, it shows a sign that we are already moving there.
Okay.
But I want to encourage that those who have benefited can also mobilize others to come on board to be able to benefit from these government programs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Before we take a short break, you mentioned about UPE schools, and we remember that UNEB recently released a roadmap of how the exams are going to be done, and they released also a timetable for the PWDs to sit their exams. However, we still have discrimination in schools. What do you have to say to teachers who discriminate students, or to other students who discriminate the disabled?
No, I think, Carol, the area of discrimination is more to persons. An individual. Someone looks at you as a disabled and says, I don't like this person. And that one, you have to take long to train. One thing I tell people, disability is not meant for a certain group of people. Anytime anybody can be disabled, whether you want to discriminate me, whether you want to look at me like ABC, but you don't know when it comes to you. And as far as you live on us, and if you are not going to die abruptly, you're going to get a disability. That's why when you get old, you have a walking stick. That's when you lose your eyesight. You begin losing the memory. You lose whatever. So you are getting into the disability arena. So I think the issue of discrimination, the UNEB is already assured of issues of disability, and that's why they bring the program on board. We know there are teachers who have also brought up these children, trained them to be able to work on. But the other individuals who have their own personal issues of discrimination, to me, it's really a personal attitude of a person to look at somebody and says, I don't think you are fit to be here.
Thank you. Obos in 2016 indicated that 12.4% of Ugandans live with some form of disability. Now this translates to about 4.5 million Ugandans. It's about a number of people. However, to be sure, the government is set to prioritize PWDs in the upcoming census in 2024 in order to ease budget allocation, and we hope for the best when that comes along. However, let's take a very, very short break. We'll be back with the minister, and we'll be discussing the Deaf Awareness Week that started on 19th September 2023. We'll be back. Thank you so much for being a part of Issues at Hand this morning. We are still here discussing the PWDs, or persons with disabilities, a very special group of people in our community that we ought not to ignore. And of course, government has done a very, very great job when it comes to inclusion of PWDs in society, in government programs, and all the other programs that government comes up with. We are still in studio with the Honorable Minister of State for PWDs. Her name is Hellen Asalo, and she's Asamo, and she's from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Honorable, give us your experience as a person with disability. How have you managed? If somebody is to learn from you, any lesson they can learn from you. If somebody is out there and they're disabled, what is the lesson that they can go away with?
Yeah, I think first of all, when you're a disabled person, accept the disability. You have to accept that it has come. I am disabled. Many people call it lame. Some people say, oh, I'm blind, I'm deaf, and ABCD. If you begin taking it as like it will ever change, then there will be challenge. That is what God has put you in. And some of us pride because me, I'm a Christian.
Amen.
And I keep telling people that if God says we're made in his image, I feel proud that I am in the image of God who made me in the way I am. But also, when you are out there in the public and how some of us manage it, I went to a school which was generally for everybody. And there are things like, because I have a physical disability, like running, athletics, they used to refuse me to come and run, but I would get into the field and I take off, whether I'll fall down or not, and I tell them,
wow,
I paid the fees. My
wow,
mother paid fees, and I have to do practice in this. I would go for swimming lessons, and they'll first look at me and say, this is the issue. So disability is always the barrier. Even when I was getting into employment, it was the barrier. Somebody said, you can't be a teacher when you are disabled. All the children in the class will be looking at you, and you will not be learning. And they will say, oh my God, why don't you give me this job? And I try. When I wanted to become a head teacher, the first interview they asked me, do you have a health problem? I said, no, I hope you don't look at my disability because I've grown with it.
Yeah.
I've grown with it. It has never become a sickness. It has never gone anywhere. And then the next question they asked me, how will you be moving around the school? And I told them, the best thing you do for me is to give me this job because my headmaster never moves around. He only waits for reports from the juniors to bring. So save me from moving and give me the position. And then the panel looked at me and they smiled. At the end of the day, Caro, I had the job.
Wow.
And I was the only woman who was given that thing. So about capacity building, about getting to know your rights, please, I want the disabled to know they have their rights. Stop lamenting.
Yeah.
That book of lamentation, we left it. We should go to Exodus and move on. Because if you don't show people your capabilities, then you cannot manage. You know why I like Church of Uganda? I pray in the All Saints.
Okay.
Sometimes we get this young girl coming to read the brailled Bible. And I see the whole church amazed, and they are wondering how she's touching dots. At that point, if they brought that brailled Bible and gave to a person who sighted, I'm very sure it will be a miracle. They will not even say anything.
Sure.
If you got a deaf person who is able to now the sign language interpreting and is giving you a message, and you say, hey, how did this person come out? But because of attitudes, because of discrimination, some of us, we managed to go through it. My mother was very overprotective. She didn't want me to do many things, but I think I broke also that barrier because every time she says, you know, you're already disabled, don't do this, you know, you'll not do this, you know, my child, I have to check where you are going to school. And she feels like she has to escort you every morning. And I'm like, but I feel like I'm comfortable. I have friends, I'll go with them. But I think in her mind, she always used to think of an accident or something again bad to happen to her child. And that overprotection sometimes doesn't allow us to grow. Because you stay in that comfort zone, thinking your parent will always be there. But supposing the parent died, what will happen to you? So I want to encourage my disabled people that let us learn to fight for our rights.
Okay.
I am here today, I'm a minister, but I did not come here as a minister, but I came through a struggle. And when I'm in a cabinet, I'm like any other minister. Nobody looks at my disability, they look at my capacity.
Amen.
Yeah.
Talking about employment, by the way, there is a 15% tax cut in case you employ people with disabilities. If you didn't know and you have a company out there and you're planning not to employ people with disabilities, you're missing out on that chance. There's a 15% cut anytime you employ a person with disabilities in Uganda. That is where I'd like to move to the Deaf Awareness Week. Why the Deaf Awareness Week? Yeah, the Deaf Awareness Week is an international commemoration. Every year, around this time, the deaf celebrate Deaf Awareness Week. But what is unique this time in Uganda, we have what we call a 50 years of
having the deaf community come together in Uganda.
Oh.
So they have 50 years, so meaning they have a golden anniversary. So this time it's very unique in that they are going to celebrate. They are going to look at lessons learned from where they came up to where they are now. Because by the time the deaf community started coming, you remember in the community they used to call them Kasiru. Today we call them people with hearing challenges. Maybe they are deaf, maybe they are having this, but it's not, you cannot call them Kasiru because Kasiru means stupid.
Yeah.
And a person who is working well, have a member of parliament who is deaf, and then you can't call him a Kasiru. But that was the language by then. So now if you looked at the way we have moved with the deaf community, they have really moved. Government has given schools, some of them have access to education. We have Intinda School for the Deaf, we have Ngora School for the Deaf, we have schools, 2 schools now for secondary Wakiso, and also we have one in Imbale, and also introducing vocational. So they have gone to school. Government has given a quota in terms of joining the university. So deaf people have also entered into the education system. So the deaf of today, as we celebrate our gains, are not the same deaf 50 years ago.
True.
So that's why we are celebrating, to see how can we look at it. And I wanted to give you the theme. The theme is celebrating 50 years of the struggle of the deaf, because it has been a struggle for people to appreciate you. And I want to imagine that time there were no sign language interpreters to come to a TV and talk. Nobody thought about it. So these are people who are saying deaf people's human rights. A Uganda where deaf people everywhere can sign anywhere. So meaning if they came here and started signing, Carol, be ready to learn sign language so that you can talk to the deaf community and they will understand you. Because now they are saying anywhere. So they will be coming with their language and we shall be able to understand it.
So about what should people take away? What should people know about this week? Or where, and that second question is, where are the celebrations going to happen?
The celebrations have already started on the 18th, and they are going to have a line of activities. Yesterday we were in the media center. There's going to be a football match. I think it's going to be in Makerere, the hearing and the non-hearing. So you will imagine, I think when you are seated here, you are wondering, how are the deaf going to play football with the hearing? What's going to happen? But when you are in football field, you are concentrating where the ball is going. You are not concentrating on the noise. And so the deaf are going to do that. We are also going to have a beauty pageant demonstrating the beauty of young ladies with hearing impairment. One time in Uganda, there was a young girl called Aidat who's going to lead this program, who became the first runner-up in Miss Uganda. Wow. I want to imagine she was going to be Miss Uganda, because again of challenge of discrimination, they said, let's make her number 2. How can now we promote a deaf one for Uganda? What will people in the world say, you know? Just that disability made her to get that, but she was among the best. Wow. So Aidat has picked this, and she wants to bring what? The young people. And we shall conclude by having the celebrations in Miss Steele Hotel. That will be on the 23rd. And the deaf will have a documentary which they are going to show out to the public and tell them what happens and that kind of thing. There are issues of sexual rights, issues of HIV, and all these are going to be handled within this week. So
the celebrations are happening at Miss Steele Hotel?
Yes.
And all deaf people are invited?
All the deaf people, but for Miss Steele, they are doing a fundraising, to be specific. So the public is invited to pay at least some money, buy a ticket, and support the deaf community to be able to support them in their development of their sign language. And they also want to bring issues of vocational training to train some of their young people who have not gone very far to get some vocational skills. So that money will be translated into building the capacities of the others. So that one we are calling upon the general public to come and support us, to ensure that buy a ticket and support a deaf person.
Thank you. Talking about job creation or vocational studies, what should a person with disabilities do in terms of job creation to create for themselves a living, and not stay back in the community and sit back and relax and say, for me, I'm already disabled, life has refused? How should they fight to get to engage in job creation?
I think the issue of job creation is not true that disabled people are all seated. There are some of them who could be seated. But majority of the people with disabilities use their hands, what God has left for them.
Yes.
I will tell you, We used to have somebody who was a telephone operator those days before we got these mobile phones. And that gentleman is still alive. He's called Bule. He has over 500 mobile numbers on his head. And no Ugandan can tell me they know 500 numbers. Personally, when I sit here, I think I know the one of my husband only. The rest, even of my own children, I don't know by head. So this person was working on a telephone booth and was able to connect people, whoever called them. We have people who do crafts. And some people like the deaf community, the blind community, whatever, make very good sweaters and bags and they sell in the public. We do wine, and some of our people are doing wine. That's why that money you asked me about goes in to support them in those enterprises that they can do. So most of them have created their own jobs. Some of them are farmers. Somebody will be surprised to say, we have farmers who are blind and they are there and they do it very well, and they garden. Somebody will even tell you, maybe you needed to have brought me when they were still starting to dig so that I can believe. We still have a lot of doubting Thomases. So we are encouraging vocational training and capacity building of the young people with disabilities in order for them to begin creating their jobs, because we know the job market right now, even for the able-bodied, is still limited. So if we don't improve our skills to get our self-employment, it becomes very hard for you to survive. So my encouragement is that we continue with kind of vocationalization. As a ministry, I'm even in discussion with the State House to ensure that all the youth hubs begin to take in people with disabilities, so that they're also trained in vocational training, maybe bakery, maybe mat making, maybe whatever, and then they'll come out to the public and be able to support themselves.
And lastly, maybe I would ask the relationship of Ministry of Gender with other societies or other communities of the disabled, like Nodipu, for example. What is the relationship you have with these other companies that work with disabled people?
Nodipu is a civil society organization, and other organizations are civil society. Our work as a ministry is to coordinate. We coordinate both ministry departments and agencies to ensure that we have the same vision. And the same vision is to look at a person with what? Disabilities. So if Nodipu has got issues, because they are an advocacy agency, they come up with proposals. With proposals now as government, we can turn them into policies. So I think that is where we work together and ensure that these policies, when they come together, we are able to drive them to the level of benefiting a person with disability, because that's the aim. All of us have to look at the same person, and that's the person with disability. We cannot never be competitors, but government is the big arm, and then the civil society work under the government and must benefit the person with disability at the end of the day.
Your last words to our viewers today.
I want first of all to say thank you to Family TV for hosting us here. It has been exciting to be here and talk about people with disabilities generally, as per the way you carried the interview, but also specific to the deaf community. I want in a special way to invite the public to come and see the deaf. When the football match is on, please go and watch how the hearing and the non-hearing can play. Sometimes it can change you as a parent. There are parents who are hiding these children, but when you see these people in public, you begin thinking, I think I need to bring mine also to the public. And I want to invite all of you to Miss Steele on the 23rd. Please come and buy a ticket and be able to support the deaf community to enhance their programs and also build the capacity of the deaf community. Thank you so much, and I want to pray that God bless all the listeners and the viewers.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was Honorable Hellen Asamo, the Minister of State for PWDs in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. I'd like to also thank, in a special way, Jagwe Michael, our sign language interpreter, for the great work well done. And of course, this has been Issues at Hand this morning. We'll be here tomorrow for yet another show. Don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms, personally at Karo Amani on all social media platforms, but also Church of Uganda Family TV on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and YouTube, where we shall post these videos so you can go comment on them and continue the conversation. From us as the production crew, from Didmas, from Shama, and I, it is a good morning.